I'm David Thornburg, President and CEO of the Committee of 70, Philadelphia's longstanding advocate for better government, better politics, and more engaged citizens. We have a primary election coming up on May 21st, and there are a lot of folks running for City Council, the Office of City Commissioners, judges, other citywide offices. And the way we look at campaigns is it's a job interview. So in that spirit, we've been interviewing candidates for City Council and the Office of City Commissioner. And I'm here with Moira Bohannon, who's running for City Commissioner, and we're going to spend a couple of minutes talking with her about her past, present, and what she hopes will be her future as a City Commissioner. So, Moira, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
First question, which is particularly important for this office. Most people have no idea that it exists or what it is. So, in your view, what is the job and why are you running for it?
So I think, you're absolutely right. As I've been going around Philadelphia, the first question I get is, well, what is this? And I think the office is charged with, obviously the managing of elections, but also engaging voters so that people show up for elections. And I think that second part in particular, but also a little bit of the first part, has been problematic in the last few years. And I think with my project management background and my communications background, that I'd be suited for both elements of that. When I went into the voting booth in 2018, it was the wrong ballot. So for 2.5 hours, my neighbors' votes didn't count because we were voting for the wrong state rep. And that's really what spurred me to look into running for this office. We can't afford any mistakes on election day. And there's mistakes throughout the city where people's votes aren't counting. And I do think that, I can do a better job than what's being done right now.
Right. So you pointed out there's kind of one big part of the job is making sure that, as they say, the trains run on time in May and November. And that doesn't always happen. So, and then there's a larger issue of turnout and why people do or don't come out to vote. So just talk about that a little bit more. What's your version of how those two work together, the way that the elections run and people's willingness to come out and vote? Any particular ideas about how to increase turnout or to make the system work better?
So I'm a single mom from North Philly, and I share a lot of similarities with other working families in the city where, we're thinking about how to, pay for the grocery bill, keep the electricity on, and voting is an afterthought in many cases, if a thought at all. I think that I can really reach the non-voters, as well as the pre-voters, kids about to turn 18, to show why it matters, especially in these municipal elections. Local elections have a lot greater influence on the day-to-day life of Philadelphians. And if we're in the communities where people are, not just at political events, not just at ward meetings, because those people are more likely to vote, but at block parties, at community events, at churches, at where Philadelphians are, we can begin to get people to understand why voting twice a year, every year is important.
Yeah. What's the most effective message? What works? Beyond, it's important and it affects you.
So it needs to be targeted to different groups. Some people in my neighborhood, the Temple Stadium is a major issue right now. And my neighborhood doesn't have a great turnout. But if we did, maybe the people who represent us would have a faster decision on that issue than what it took.
Do you recall what turnout was, say, last fall in your ward and your division?
Last fall, I'm sorry, I don't have the specific number at the top of my head, but we were, if not the lowest turnout ward, in the bottom 2 or 3.
So here's a question for you. Should ward leaders be held accountable for turnout in their wards?
I believe that it's more about getting people involved and getting people to work together to, increase turnout everywhere. It's not so much, a slap on the wrist, but looking at the lower turnout wards and say, what can we do together to increase turnout?
So other folks have suggested that part of the job is you carry an agenda for change to Harrisburg.
Yes.
Does that factor into your sense of the job? And if so, what kinds of issues would you put in your agenda?
Yeah, I absolutely think that we should be working with Harrisburg to discuss decreasing barriers to voting. Open primaries, I think, is a great idea. No excuse absentee ballot would actually be my first priority with Harrisburg. My first job out of college was an education lobbyist, and I know lobbyist is a dirty word, but I really learned how to build coalitions, and working with commissioners across the state would get our voice from Philadelphia heard, because Harrisburg doesn't pay a lot of attention to us right now.
Yeah. Have, no excuse absentee ballots, and what was the other one?
Open primaries,
right.
same-day voter registration. There's a lot of
Yeah.
issues, in reducing barriers.
Yep. Part of the challenge there isn't it that when we talk about doing those things on behalf of Philadelphia, that it changes the balance of power around the Commonwealth.
Right.
Because this is a heavily Democratic city. So how would you blunt that, or how would you work around that, or how would you own it?
So I think
the sort of sense of like, this is a conspiracy, you folks in Philadelphia are trying to gin up Democratic votes to,
Right, turn PA blue would be one reason, as we saw in the last presidential election. But I think working with commissioners in redder parts of the state, in building a coalition of rural and urban and suburban commissioners, can get that message across.
Okay, let me talk a little bit about what you have done, and maybe I'll start just by asking, since it follows from the last thought. Do you have experience working in Harrisburg on similar kinds of issues, or you talked about being a lobbyist at some point, was that more national level?
I was based in DC for that. So no, I haven't worked directly with Harrisburg, but the lessons from that can apply.
Okay. So more generally, we'll presume you've had a satisfying and important to you career. So tell us about what you've been able to accomplish, what you sort of dug into. What are you most proud of that translates easily to this role?
So I've really worked in a variety of jobs with a focus on communications and project management. Like I said, I was a lobbyist, and that was building coalitions around mitigating No Child Left Behind. I worked for bilingual and migrant education students and addressing issues with testing in English versus ESL, testing accessibility. That can translate directly into making voting more accessible, both in a language aspect. The information coming out of the office should be in languages that all Philadelphians speak, and right now it's not as good as it could be. And then accessibility, I was working on the reauthorization of the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, and taking those lessons to improving accessibility for Philadelphians with disabilities.
So where have the commissioners in in the near term, last few years, fallen short in terms of access to people with disabilities or people with language barriers?
Well, right now, I'll start with the language. I think one of the easiest ways to improve on what's been done is translate the website into more languages, and with better translation. I don't speak Spanish, but I've heard that it's a very poorly translated site into Spanish. And any information out to voters should be translated to the languages that Philadelphians speak. For disabilities, or for accessibility issues, it's a much broader problem. Less than 20% of voting polling places are accessible, and the new machines were not ranked highly by the ADA. So while I'm not sure how much I can change the voting machines, as we know that's an ongoing problem, just addressing the issues that they cause and making voting more accessible by updating polling locations.
Yep, you mentioned it, so let's talk about it a little bit more. The commissioners back in late February,
yes,
the current commissioners approved a new voting machine, in theory to be available in this November, following a mandate from the governor that says we have to do something because our machines are not as secure as they could be.
Right.
lot of controversy around that decision. So where are you on that? What would you do about it? Is it too late?
So I don't like the machine that they chose. I think that I prefer the optical scan machine, but I don't believe that any machine would make everybody happy. I'm more upset with the process, that it was rushed. There was very little communication with stakeholders, that even when the state auditor general and the city controller were yelling that this process is a problem, it was pushed forward. So I would like to increase transparency of the office so nothing like that happens again, especially when we're talking about tens of millions of dollars at stake.
Let me just push you on that for a second.
Sure.
People talk about town hall meetings or community meetings and so forth. Like, what's the best way to do that? Like, here's a decision. We have to make a decision. There are people out there.
Well, talking about how it was done, there was just the minimum for the Sunshine Act to get the meetings out, and committee members didn't know about it except through a Facebook post that wasn't from the commissioner's office. So it's about communication at the ground of it. It's about getting people to know that these decisions are happening from the start, not at the very end of the process. And it's, like I said, going to community meetings, being there, and if more people are aware of the office, which is one of my goals, more people will be aware of these community meetings. I think that the commissioners should hold meetings throughout the city as well, and at different times. The getting to City Hall or on Delaware Avenue is not convenient to most of the city.
Yeah. So let's fast forward. It's now 2023. Let's presume you won. You've been elected. You're interested in getting reelected. April 23. Looking back on your 4 years, what would you like to say that you had accomplished in that period of time?
I want to. This is vague, and I'll go into it a little more. But I want that to have a confidence in the election system that I don't think is there. And
so how do you measure that?
I think turnout's a big thing, that, if people are aware that we vote twice a year every year, and if the commissioners, and I would be one of them, out in the community showing people how to vote on the new machines, and in recruiting and training poll workers who know what to do when something's wrong and catch mistakes early on. So it's not 2.5 hours of people voting on the wrong machine, on the wrong ballot. We're making less mistakes. We're delivering Philadelphia votes and we're confident in what those results are.
We've noticed that there are jurisdictions around the country that do, in our view, a much better job of reporting after the fact how we did on election day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing, based on what you just said, you'd support some kind of an after action report, a month after the election, the city commissioners stepped forward and said, here's how we did. Wait times, absentee ballots,
exactly,
et cetera, et cetera.
And publicizing the problems that we ran into as well as the successes, so that those are out in the open and can be addressed for the next time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. It's a big job, and particularly made more challenging by the fact that, as we said at the outset, not a whole lot of folks understand what it is.
Right.
But thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
And best of luck to you out on the trail, as we wished everybody. So
thank you.
Okay.
Have a great day.
Okay. So again, David Thornburg from the Committee of 70. We have a primary election coming up May 21st. Make a plan now. I encourage your friends, neighbors, relatives, family to make a plan as well. If you want to get more in depth on the candidates, the issues, and the logistics of voting, go to our world-class voters guide, nonpartisan voters guide at 70.org. Also, you can download our We Vote app from the App Store or wherever you get your favorite app, and that will put everything you need in the palm of your hand to be a super voter on May 21st and beyond. Thanks again, Moira, for joining me, and we'll see you at the polls.